So I want to talk to you first about the inspiration for this film.
Uh-huh.
I understand that you were raised with the Baha'i faith, which is based on the spiritual unity of all religions. Was your belief in that a big factor towards the making of this film?
Sure. I guess the beginning of the film came out of Scared Sacred. It's part of a trilogy, and Scared Sacred is my journey to the ground zeros of the world, looking for hope in the face of crisis. I went to Hiroshima, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Palestine, New York City during 9/11. And in making that film, I discovered that it was two things that really got people through these crises. One was having a source of meaning, and the other was taking action to try to prevent what had happened to them from happening to anybody else. So that to me led to Fierce Light, the second in the trilogy, which is about bringing together spirituality and activism, or spirit and action, also the head and the heart. Fierce Light is also a synonym for what Gandhi called soul force and Martin Luther King called love in action. And so my own background as a Baha'i naturally set me up to have one of my core understandings is that the human family is all united, that we're part of a great family. That's a Baha'i understanding. All religions come from the same source, and that we're deeply, deeply interconnected. And that to me is a spiritual understanding, whether you belong to a religion or not, which I no longer do. The understanding of interconnectedness or as Archbishop Tutu says in the film, Ubuntu, I am because you are, that we exist in relationship, that to me really changes the way you create change in the world. Mm-hmm.
In Fierce Light, you feature a number of high-profile activists who are part of the documentary. Did these activists change or influence the direction of the film in any way?
So the film, when I make a film, the first thing is the seed begins with a change that's happening within me. And then when I see that reflected in the greater world around me, I know that could be the basis for a film. So I started to see this urge in me to bring together my spiritual side, my activism side, and also to shift the way I created change in the world. And I started seeing that taking place in the world around me as well. And so as I set out to make the film, it's like a biofeedback loop. And I started to discover that this change that I was feeling is happening around the world, that it's a kind of change that comes from the ground up. It's horizontal. It's not top down. It's not so hierarchical. It's self-organizing to a large extent. Paul Hawken, in his book Blessed Unrest, calls it humanity's immune response to a planet in crisis. And there's all these, and he's documented literally millions of these kinds of initiatives taking place around the world that have a shared set of values. And they don't even know necessarily that each other exists, but he calls it the largest undocumented movement in history. And some of these values include recognizing the interconnectedness of issues, coming from the heart as well as the head, focusing on what you're for, not just on what you're against, recognizing the unity of humankind and that we're interconnected, and this horizontal, shared collaborative approach to power. Not the old patriarchal power over models, but what you could call co-powering, so shared power.
I just wanted to ask you, do you consider yourself an activist or a filmmaker?
I consider myself a cinematic activist. I was calling myself a media activist before, but my films are actually very, very cinematic. So now I've decided I'm a cinematic activist. And my films are kind of poetic essay films, so they're kind of a hybrid of documentary and very visual, almost like films like Koyaanisqatsi or other films like that you maybe don't often associate with the documentary style. So that style has been called poetic essay documentary filmmaking. So it has very concrete themes and ideas and issues that it explores. But what I try to do with my films is give you a visceral sense, a visceral feeling. So it's not just an intellectual understanding, that you're actually feeling it at other levels. The Vancouver Film Festival said that Fierce Light was a spiritual experience in itself. And what I find happening as I tour with the film and show the film is that the film is about fierce light. The film is about this soul force, and it actually brings you on a journey of connecting with your own fierce light. You actually get a taste of it. So you actually go through a journey that at a certain point your heart gets broken, and then you come out the other side, and you are left with a sense of inspiration, but it's a fierce inspiration. It's not fierce light, L-I-T-E, so you actually have to earn it. So the film is an emotional narrative arc as well. Yeah.
You've said in interviews that fierce light is the leading edge of a global shift in consciousness. Can you give us more of a sense of what you mean by that?
Well, I feel like feature documentaries are really great tools for catalyzing change. So the film I see is doing both reflecting a change that I see in the world, and while at the same time catalyzing it to try to encourage more of this change to take place. Do I think the movement's going to spread and the ideas are going to catch fire? I think so. But I am extremely hopeful. And hope and optimism aren't the same. Optimism, and my favorite quote from Professor Cornel West, which I often recount, I might as well do it again, is he talks about the difference between hope and optimism. He says optimism is based on the facts, looks pretty good out there, things are going to get better. Whereas hope says, it don't look good at all, but I'm going to take the leap of faith to create new visions based on possibilities that become contagious to encourage people to engage in heroic acts against the odds, no guarantee whatsoever. That's hope. And that's what I feel is the state of the planet right now. It's in really bad shape. And, I was talking to a group of high school students this week because I was the artist in residence at Trent University, and they brought me out to some schools. And I asked the entire school assembly, I said, how many people here think this planet's in crisis? Everyone put up their hands. There's a sense now that it's pretty widespread that the planet's in trouble with multiple adversity trends. And climate change is the biggest unifying factor right now. And these are scary, but also they might help us to wake up, and we have to get aware of this before we will actually choose to become more conscious. So I'm actually very hopeful that the fact that the situation is so dire might just be enough to wake us up out of the numbing, dumbing down that we're subjected to constantly by consumer culture.
In the film, what did you find were the common qualities and characteristics that you saw with the events and the people you met? Was there one unifying theme that really stood out for you?
Sure. I mean, in terms of the people that I met, every single one of the people in the film live their message. So they have a fierce light. They walk the walk and they talk the talk. It's not something that's from the neck up. These people actually, they're not just saying what the flavor of the month is. They're not politicians putting a spin on it. They really are living the message that they're giving to the world. From Archbishop Desmond Tutu to Van Jones, who's my hero, who recently got booted out of the White House by a right-wing hate sort of smear campaign. But usually that's what happens to good people, is they get turfed by people with hate in their hearts. But Van Jones, fantastic. He lives his message. All the people, Julia Butterfly, Congressman John Lewis is like the walking embodiment of Martin Luther King Jr. So they all have that fierce light.